Welcome to the HOLDO MANEUVER podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Mike. We're two hardworking dads trying to immerse ourselves into Star Wars and fit it into our very busy lives.
If this is your first time listening and or watching, in this sometimes short-form Star Wars podcast, we'll share our thoughts on different topics from a galaxy far, far away. So join us as we prepare to execute the HOLDO Maneuver. All right.
You gotta go to Arizona, don't you?
Yeah.
He'll be back. Don't worry. Welcome.
Yeah, that was walk's getting better, getting a little bit faster, but yeah.
You're cutting corners?
Yeah. So
find a quicker route?
Yeah, let's add our guest, Paul, in this week. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the HOLDO Maneuver.
Hey guys, did you hear about the two Kevin Owens who are on a race?
I can't say that I have. I know they're probably underwater by now.
Well, it was neck and neck.
Oh, yes.
Ooh,
there we go. We got 30.
They were playing. They were asleep because of that joke.
So, yes. So this is episode 47 of the HOLDO Maneuver. This week we have Mr. Paul Hermann, aka P-Thug, joining us all the way from the many different shows that he does online. You may have heard or seen him on the Saga Continues, the Comic Binge, or the MCU Fan Show, among many things. He was recently on our buddy who edits our show, Vactor's show, not too long ago. So joining us this week, we're going to be talking about Return of the Jedi for the 40th anniversary. That was just the past few days ago, recently. Now, this movie came out back in May of 1983, at May 25th to be exact. Now, I know I didn't get a chance to, and I'm bummed out about it still. Did any of us get to go to see the 40th anniversary re-release in theaters?
No, man. Life is chaos right now.
Well, now I feel less bad that I didn't get to see it.
5 hours away.
Oh man, yeah. And my son the other day is like, "So can we go see Return of the Jedi in theaters still?" I was like, "No, it was only in theaters that
one night only."
Yeah,
I think it played ironically or coincidentally enough until May 4th.
They played it
like the last day. Yeah, the last day.
It was like a whole
playing.
week. It was a whole week or something like that.
And I was like, "No, it was only that week." And he's like, "Well, why didn't you tell me that?" I did tell you that.
Blew it.
You're of the age where you don't listen to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't remember exactly how old both of your kids are, but when they hit definitely a certain age, that the not listening becomes even more intense. So
even more than it is already, right? Okay.
Mine's 4 and it's pretty bad. So
mine's 3 and it's interesting.
So once they become teenagers, it's like they're not. It's like
they tune you out.
But then it comes back eventually, or so I'm told. So
hopefully,
you just say money and they perk right up.
Yes. Oh. Especially when they graduate and they get a bunch of graduation cards. So now with Return of the Jedi, I know sometimes this is like the first film a lot of people saw sometimes for whatever reason. Was this the first movie that you all saw, Paul, Mike?
I don't recall the order in which I saw all the Star Wars ones, to be honest. I feel like I played the Star Wars SNES game first and then watched the movies.
Really? Interesting.
But I just don't remember. Because I remember it was when we had roller skating parties in school.
Named after the character from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series.
Reva.
Yeah.
And I want to say 4th grade was the one we had, or someone had a birthday party there, and the DJ was doing Star Wars trivia, and I won every single prize.
Nice.
So I definitely had seen it by then, by 4th grade, and I had seen it enough to where I knew all the answers to every single question asked.
Well, there you go.
But I don't recall the first viewing.
How about you, Paul?
Well, I don't remember the first viewing. All I remember is that I've known Star Wars and like Marvel comics since I can remember. Like I just
Same.
always knew they existed. And so I remember watching Return of the Jedi very, very young. I think it's the first one I watched. And I remember loving Jabba's palace like the moment I saw it. And because I was a big Muppet fan, because the Muppet Show was going
Makes
on.
sense.
And so my parents knew I like that stuff. And I want to say, I'm pretty sure I was the first one I saw, because I grew up only seeing Empire and Jedi. I had no idea there was a third one until I was in kindergarten. So I had spent like a good portion of my life at the time, like only thinking there's 2 movies, because I came in Empire just like it's just going dropped right in, like, oh, this is like, you know. And so, but yeah, Jedi, I think, was the first one I'd seen, because I remember some of my earliest memories are of my parents. This is going to date me. I'm not sure if I'm the oldest one here or not, but my parents renting a VCR and Return of the Jedi, and me watching it like a zillion times before.
I had a Betamax growing up.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah, same, about the same time frame, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, I remember the day. I remember vividly, honestly. I was very, very young. And I think I was, or I'm not sure how old I was. I think I was pre-kindergarten or kindergarten, right around there. And I remember watching the part where Bausch Leia is like walking to defreeze Han.
Yeah.
And so when my mom walked in like during that time, and she's like, we gotta turn it off and return it, I was like, no. I begged her not to do it, and of course she did, and I was devastated. So
got those late fees.
Yeah, man. So yeah, so I want to say I probably was when I was, because I was born in 82, it came out in 83, so it was probably like 85-ish, maybe. I may have seen it, but the first time I can remember vividly from my memory of like, oh yeah, this is like Star Wars, or this is cool, was probably around like 85, 86-ish, maybe. 86, 87. I would say 86. I think 86 sounds like a good number, because I had weird memories of when I was really young, but like they're all scattered. So
right.
But
yeah, I think for me, Return of the Jedi was the first one I saw too, because I know like I would watch. I specifically remember the VHS case that like had half of Yoda's face on it with like the not purple but like burgundy.
Oh yeah, that was the 90s release. That was the early 90s or the mid 90s release, I should say, around that time frame. Yeah,
because it was before the special edition came out, but I remember like watching the VHS of that with my cousins at my grandparents' house. It was and it was either between like watching that VHS or like when they would play the movies on TNT all the time. Like
I remember
everybody remembers
on
Star Wars
TNT.
playing on TNT.
Oh yeah.
I remember when it was a big deal when Revenge of the Sith like played on TNT for the first time. But I have that Mustafar up there. But
I love Revenge of the Sith. It's my jam.
That is my favorite. Well, not my favorite, but it's up in
it's in my top 3.
Yeah. So yeah, mine would go Empire, Return of the Jedi, or sorry, not Empire. Revenge of the. Actually, no. I'm gonna double check.
Just give me the top 3. I can tell you right now what my top 3 are. Really easy. Right. It's Empire, Jedi, flip a coin, and then Revenge of the Sith.
All right. How about you, Mike?
Well, we just doing Skywalker trilogy or all Star Wars?
All Star Wars films, dude.
All Star
so
Wars.
my top one is Empire, then Rogue One, and then I always give credit to the first one, because without it, we wouldn't have any of it.
I always call the first one my first prequel, because I never because I didn't know it existed, and I'll never forget. I always tell the story when people like talk about it, this kind of story, and I always say I was in kindergarten, and I remember at night, my mom and dad were like, "Oh, hey, Paul, the first Star Wars movie's coming on." I went, "Oh, Empire," and she's, "No, the first one." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so I'm like, they're like telling me what happens. I'm like, that doesn't happen. What? And then I remember being like, "Is Yoda in it?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "What?" It felt very awkward to me. Yeah, I was like, I'm not watching this crap, you know. So, and honestly, like it wasn't until the last, like I'd say, 15 years that I really started like appreciating that movie for what it is. To be honest, it was always my least favorite of the three because it was my.
That's how I feel about the prequels. Is like when they came out, I was such a moody teenager that I didn't respect them enough. And now I like look back at them and have that appreciation for them because of what they actually are.
Yeah, it's you know, it is. I mean, it's like the Return of the Jedi. You know, I had no idea people even hated it or didn't like Ewoks until I was a teenager, and I'm being like, what? People hated this? Like, what are you talking about? And it wasn't until I got, you know, Jar Jar Binks that I kind of understood that perspective, right? But at the same time,
it's true. Yeah.
It's not the right perspective either. You have to know the context of what you're watching, right? And so, you know that. To be, you know, it's so weird because Star Wars, you know, is always, I always learn a lot of life lessons through Star Wars, whether I like it or not. And either if and I mean that in a way of like funny, haha, I learned a valuable lesson, like no, or like I hate you guys are named after a movie I learned a lot from that I don't necessarily love, which is The Last Jedi, the Holdo Maneuver. You know, I mean, I'm not a big fan of that movie for a lot of reasons. And that being said, I learned a lot about, to be honest, about how I should deal with things as an adult when like my favorite franchises goes a route I don't like, and how does that affect everything going afterwards? You know, because it does affect your fandom. Right. And Return of the Jedi is interesting. Go and get full circle back to Return of the Jedi. It's interesting because of the Ewoks, and everyone, you know, talked bad about them, but you know, I grew up on Ewoks, and I will take a grenade and do a kamikaze for, you know, nice. Ewoks if I have to. I mean, it's just, you know, I will not tolerate people bashing Ewoks. They don't have to like them, that's fine, but being like, this is crap, I'll be like, shut up. No, it's like, no, it's just you were expecting one thing, and again, right. that's something that and then I got older, I had to deal with the prequel trilogy and then extensive to the sequel trilogy in some regards as well. So, I mean, Return of the Jedi is kind of like the first kind of, like, I think, lesson for Star Wars fans that you kind of like the older generation that I am, the original generation, you could say, which I guess you could say I'm part of that original generation, barely, but that first like wave of fans, you could say, they had their first lesson of like, maybe it's not, Star Wars is not necessarily for me. It hasn't, it's for the general, I always say it's for families. It's a family film franchise. Yeah. And when you do that, it's more than just like trying to, like, you know, appeal to like everybody. It's really more of just like tonally just very kind of all-inclusive from a tone standpoint, instead of like adding aspects. Does that make sense? So I think Return of the Jedi was the first kind of like foray into that, like for the first wave of fans being like, oh wait, Star Wars is not exactly gonna grow up with me. It's gonna stay probably for the most part like pretty consistently what it needs to be. So this is interesting.
Yeah. And I know Return of the Jedi was like the original one of the movies that people liked, or like Star Wars fans liked to bash on, or like Clerks even has like the famous scene was like, what's the
contractors?
What's your favorite Star Wars movie? Empire. It's like blasphemy. Jedi. All Jedi had was a bunch of Muppets.
But, and I love those Muppets, by the way.
Yeah,
they're awesome. Like which by Clerks always bugged me when they said that. I was like, what's wrong with Muppets? Like, what's wrong with that? Like, what? Like they were literally like puppets in freaking the first one. So
yeah. There's puppets in them now.
Like, right? Yeah, because people are like, we need to give
Yoda is a puppet.
Yeah, Yoda's a puppet. Like, what the hell? Like,
Frank Oz.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
How many times did we see baby Yoda Grogu there get thrown this season?
Oh, geez.
As a puppet,
I like Grogu's little Kermit feet when he's walking.
So freaking cute.
Really quick, because I didn't do mine really yet, but Mike, you and I, we have the same top three. So it's Empire, Rogue One, and then Star Wars. Well, that's all right. You can see the full art that way. Then it goes
That's the wrong button.
Revenge of the Sith, Last Jedi, Return of the Jedi, Force Awakens, Solo, Episode 1, Episode 2, Rise of Skywalker, and then the Clone Wars film that was released in theaters. But I will say, even though they're ranked like that, to me, there's not a bad Star Wars movie. It's still a Star Wars movie. So
that's cool.
And I just rank them because I have to rank them in some way. But
that's kind of how I feel. Like, I hate doing rankings because
Yeah.
I could be in a shit mood and rank something terribly, and then think about it a week later and be like, I want to redo that.
Yeah, it all depends on like what you're like. You could be watching Return of the Jedi today and like it more than any of the other ones because there's certain things that are hitting you.
You catch something and it's
while you're
more
watching
emotional.
it that makes you like it more. And the thing, like we were talking about Ewoks too, the thing I always think it's kind of funny with them too is that Endor, like the Forest Moon of Endor was originally supposed to be Kashyyyk.
Yeah, with Wookiees. Yeah,
and it was supposed to be Wookiees, but like they couldn't afford to do that, so that's why you get short.
Well, plus Lucas also said that because he established that they're like smart, like technology wise. And so when he established that, he realized, well, I can't really have them because he always thought about, he wanted to have, parallel a little bit to the Vietnam War of like this very like lesser, like, culture. You could, I'm putting air quotes because that's what, we came in with like machine guns and like tanks, and they're beating us and keeping us at bay with like minimal weapons, and because they knew the territory. And that's kind of what he wanted to kind of like parallel and like kind of take from.
Right.
And he realized that Wookiees were already established to be like kind of smart technology wise because one's a co-pilot, right? So when he did that, he realized, well, I can't have them be, they'd be like, of course they beat the Empire because they're, they have weapons, or they're
it's
smart.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because now, how many times have we seen that the Wookiees have been enslaved to go work in the mines?
Yeah. Because
it's like they went opposite with what Lucas was thinking. Like the Empire's just like, we just take all the Wookiees and
that's I think Lucas, I don't think Lucas, God bless him, he never thought that hardly about the greater lore than
I can't. I imagine his head spins anytime you see like
what I think the Wookiees were always meant to be kind of slavish a little bit. Like I think that's always been, I'm just like spitballing at that point. I think he always had them to be some kind of like enslavement in some ways, because again, like he's only thinking about like the current, like not even like that, like 2 steps down necessarily. He's this, he's always at that point, he's like this movie, and this is the original trilogy era. And I've studied, and I don't say study lightly, because when episode 7 was announced, I had did my research on what Lucas, just from a creative storytelling standpoint, where he was at, and like official, non-official, because I believe when there's smoke, there's fire, but I don't believe everything's verbatim, right? But from what I gather is that he had like rough ideas of things, but when things got confirmed, he would then he just would focus on what was in front of him, and then kind of a very loose idea what was ahead of him, and then start to just, as he got closer, get things more in line. But things were all, thing about Lucas, when you research his stuff, it's always fluid. It's never like concrete. It's always changing. It's always moving. And that's why you get, instead of Wookiees, you get Ewoks, because you realize, well, I can't have this. I got to do this now. I think if he was thinking ahead of time, he would have already had that idea, like, oh, I can't use Wookiees, so I better start figuring this out before. It was like, oh, we'll have them just be teddy bears. Like, which again, it's there's like a, to me, again, I might be projecting this onto this, but it always felt like I think Lucas wanted to be like kind of ironic that these cute little teddy bears beat the
most
Empire.
likely.
I think I'm pretty sure that's what his intention was. And people get pissed off about that, but that's the whole point, is that you can't take the will. Was it, you said, Mike, you said your second favorite Star Wars movie was Rogue One. What does Jin say? Like, she basically references the Ewoks, foreshadows them. When like Saw Gerrera says, all it takes is a will and a sharp spear, and they can, anyone can overcome. It's like, that's exactly what Lucas was saying.
Yeah.
And that's why they have the line in the movies, because he wanted to emphasize, yeah, these things look harmless, but because they took their home away and they are compelled and committed, the Ewoks are going to help the rebellion overcome, and they will because they have the bigger will, they will defeat the enemy. So it's really, I think it's brilliant, but people don't, let's be real, people don't think that hard about this stuff like as much as I do. So that's what
I think a lot of the problem with the fan base, and it's something I did when the prequels came out, was you come up with this thing in your head and what you want.
Yeah.
And you can't get past it. And that's a shame. Like that I felt like, I feel bad that I felt that way when they first came out. Like I couldn't admit I enjoyed these movies because of this preconceived notion of what I wanted. And then I remember we had that long gap, and then all of a sudden everything else started coming out. And I like the sequel trilogies, I went in blank slate and I enjoyed them for what they were. Solo came out. I remember the uproar, and I was like, I enjoyed that. Like,
I love Solo to death. I love it.
What is going on here?
Well, I think that, the prequel trilogy will always be, because we came, like you great point. I think the biggest problem is we all came with our expectations of what we expected. We expected episode 3 to be episode 1. And that was never the storyteller's intention, and we took it personally that it wasn't. And like when I say we, I mean like from a collective or large fan base. And I think that, like, again, that's why I go back to the whole Star Wars is you learn lessons of maybe I should because we're all, you said you were a teenager. Same here. I was a teenager. I liked it. I just didn't love aspects of it. And I think that's kind of like a lot of things with Star Wars in general. After the original trilogy, you grow up on something. And then you're like, oh, after you get older and you get these other things, it's not as good maybe, but it's still close enough, I mean, to be honest, there's things about the prequel trilogy I still don't like episode 2. I still can't watch the Padme Anakin scenes. I skip them every time. I'm like, I can't take this. This is bad. All the Naboo stuff, I'm like, skip. It's just, I can't do it. I mean, even some scenes of Revenge of the Sith, when we're on the thing, she's all big old eyed and she's brushing her hair, and I'm just like, oh, skip. No thanks. I'm not. I mean, Natalie Portman she mails that one in, man. Whew, but anyway, but I think that the thing is, again, back to Jedi is that thing where it's kind of I look at, I can see in retrospect as I get older, I can understand why, as you grew up on, A New Hope, and you grow up in Empire, and you get Jedi, it's like, but I get it, but again, you have to grow up and you have to realize that this is not meant for one audience. It's meant for such a I say basic general audience, and Jedi, I think, is to be honest, probably the best all around general audience movie of the whole saga, you could say. I mean, from an aspect of having people, anyone could sit down from any generation before you, you could sit down and watch it. It's like Wizard of Oz, and that's original trilogy in Star Wars in general. But I would say Return of the Jedi has that something for everyone at some point in that movie that they can enjoy, instead of just we're just going to have this actor to appeal to a male or female audience, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Instead of having that, you have themes and ideas, instead of an actor and have say some funny things to take their shirt off to make them feel better. I mean, that doesn't exist. And I love that about the Return of the Jedi. It really is about a movie where a grandpa or grandma, an aunt, uncle, a father, son, second cousin can all, go and watch a movie together.
Right.
So I have a question about Return of the Jedi.
Uh-oh.
Do gonk droids feel pain in their feet?
Yeah, dude.
I think all droids feel pain.
Exactly.
And that's what we're learning over time here.
Because that's been kind of
it's an interesting thing that they did in that.
Yeah, an ongoing conversation we've had with Mando this past season, and then with Andor, with B2 Emo and whatnot. But when I was rewatching Return of the Jedi, I remembered that with the gonk droid that's getting tortured with its feet getting burned. And I remembered when I was a kid, I was like, wait, does he feel that? Does the gonk droid feel that? And then it was like blew my mind that like the gonk droid could like feel like the burn on its feet. So I just remember that being like one of like the first things in the movie that like made me like really like think about the Star Wars universe at that point and like what like everything was within that. And one of the other things that I like about the opening of the movie too is that I like that there's kind of like this whole plan, almost like this whole like Ocean's 11 type plan that like Luke, Leia, and like
doesn't make any sense, but yeah.
Like that they've like all put together somehow that was made off screen. Like Luke's got his lightsaber hidden in R2 because he knows he's going to need it at this one point. But I just like how this like whole plan was like made off screen before, like as we come in, and that like that 3PO wasn't told about it at all because of course he would get anxiety and then like when R2 is like, wait, what? So
yeah, this can't be R2. You're playing the wrong message. He's like, oh crap, what?
Yeah. Now, like the other stuff in here too, with like Luke at the beginning too, where he's like wearing all black. There's a little bit of force choking. I know there's like more recently there's been like some more debate like how much like, kind of dark side kind of influence usage, like Luke is kind of swayed, or not like swayed to, but like how kind of like riding the line he already is kind of like within Return of the Jedi. What do you guys think about that?
He definitely rides the line.
This is a you could do a whole show on this, to be quite honest, because there's a couple you can look at it from like the outside the box or outside of like baseball, like inside baseball, where you're looking at like from where Lucas was and the creation like with Kasdan, because at this time, if you watch like I don't know if you guys remember this or whoever watched this, but from Star Wars to Jedi, ever seen that making of documentary? There's a part where Lucas is doing the fitting for Luke with Mark Hamill, and he's wearing the all black, and Lucas is saying this is what Jedis wear. So he says that in the behind the scenes. And if you look at the concept art for Phantom Menace, at one point Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are wearing all black. So this is when I say all things are fluid with Lucas. This is a great example of that, because maybe I'm wrong. I would swear a lot of comics on this thing here that he says that in that making of documentary, and that's why you see it as a concept art for Qui-Gon and I think Obi-Wan in Phantom Menace and early concept stuff, because they hadn't figured out what Jedi were going to wear necessarily, but Lucas had that already in mind. But if you look at it from an outsider standpoint, it is intentional in some way too. Like, well, is he dark side or not? I don't know where Lucas was going for at this point. I think it looks awesome, to be honest. I mean, word up. But I mean, the problem is I don't know if that is necessarily was the intention, or if that was both. Like Jedi were supposed. It doesn't make sense if it was the intention of you're trying to cross that line, because of that comment Lucas makes in that documentary. So when I look at it now as a kid, I this is the beauty of being a kid, right? And this is why I wish I could I wish I could bring in the 8-year-old in me all the time, because you take things on fixed value. You don't just sit there and go, actually, like, how does this work? Like I was said the other day, like I was watching the It documentary, and I'm like, as you know, before I'm like scared to death of something, but now I'm like, well, actually, how would that work? Because I'm like, well, that's that's just whatever, right? It's just being a kid. I'm overanalyzing everything to death. So as a kid, you're gonna see Luke walk in all black. You're just gonna be like, oh, he's wearing all black now, cool. Like at least I'm assuming anyway. That's what I did. And then as I've gotten older, but then I remember hearing that when I was a kid about what Lucas said to Mark and then the fitting. And then when all of a sudden the Jedi show up with casual robes, which I think is a better take, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know what I think you retcon, if you want to use a comic book term, retcon that into it's you don't know where he's blurring the lines. Like I almost feel and again, I'm not sure if they've explained this or not, but it almost feels like they all black is like Luke doesn't know what a Jedi's supposed to wear.
Yeah.
Like he's
my take
yeah.
Is it was originally called Revenge of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So that's probably where Lucas's mind was he's out for revenge, so he's gonna wear this sleek black outfit.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then like later he's like, well, wait, Jedi don't go with revenge, so let's change it to Return of the Jedi.
I forgot. Didn't someone have to tell him that? Like,
Howard
Fisher or something?
Kananzian? Okay, I can't sort of pronounce.
I don't know. Yeah, someone told him like, they don't have.
It's a guy. It was a head guy, one of the head like people underneath him at Lucasfilm who were at the time was able to tell him no. That he probably trusted, and I think he said it was I want to say one of them said it was a weak title. I think it was, and I think it was Howard was his name, first name, Kananzian. I can't.
Let's hold this title and change it out years from now. Just change the word Jedi to Sith. That'll be a good title,
dude. When they announced Revenge of the Sith, I was like, hell yeah!
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
It's so good.
Or Blue Harvest, as it was shipped to theaters in.
Oh yeah, I like that. And then I just like because that way they don't have to tell anybody what movie they were shooting. But then I like how Family Guy used that when they did their Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember working at the theater getting,
if you know, you know.
The film canisters coming for like Star Trek and big movies has the wrong name on them because they were afraid people were going to steal them from the truck.
Oh, yeah. Because when we worked at the movie theater and we got the reels for Revenge of the Sith, I remember it had like a different name on there. I don't remember what it was now. I do remember building that and watching it by myself like 2 days before the movie came out. And so
that's awesome.
So I had seen the movie 3 times by the time it came out. So and technically you were supposed to do that for like quality assurance to make sure that you built it correctly.
Yep.
So
you have to.
But
you're paid to do it.
Yeah.
Hey, I saw Revenge of the Sith probably like 8 times in the theater. I'm not even joking. That's probably one of the most like I adore that movie to death. So
I think Mark and I watched it 3 or 4 times in a 2-day span.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I watched it every day from the day it came out for me. So good.
I know this is kind of getting away from Jedi, but one of the cool experiences from Revenge of the Sith was watching that at a drive-in because like the scenes like with Padme and Anakin on Mustafar near the end, it was all like echoing through like the forest behind the drive-in. So it made scene like so more like dramatic just because it sounded like you were like in this like cavernous area where like Padme and Anakin had like this whole like dialect going back. So it made it like a little bit more, I don't know, like immersive, I guess, than when I was watching it in a indoor theater.
That's cool.
But never been to a drive-in, so I don't know.
Oh wow.
You still live next to that drive-in. Go to it. It's good.
Never been.
It's fun. It's fun.
I remember because then like Mark said, we lived next to a drive-in, and the movie theater we worked at was owned by the same company as the drive-in, but the drive-in ticked us off all the time because they'd come like we'd have to make like garbage cans full of popcorn because they're in last minute request all the time. So whenever they'd be like, okay, you're shipping this film to us today, we'd make sure we give them like the scratched copy because they were so mad. Like we were still just like jerks to them.
That's hilarious.
Because something would always break and they'd always call us last second. We'd have to go over there. Then
rough.
We were just a-holes to them.
Now, what are your guys' opinion of the Jedi Rocks sequence at Jabba's palace in the special edition version? Because I know in the despecialized original version. Well, yeah, I got the specialized trilogy right here.
My question for you, a question to the question is, what value does it add to the movie?
Amazingness.
Mark, are you a Jedi Rocks guy?
Yeah, I like that song. I'll play that. I'll play some Jedi Rocks, and I'll play Augie's Great Municipal Band right after that.
I love Augie's Great Municipal Band.
Yeah, You got
But
Augie's Great Municipal Band. You got Jedi Rocks.
I just like
you
what
have that CG shot straight into that dude's mouth.
The Yuzum.
Yeah.
I just don't know. For me, it's like, okay, it's a scene, but what did it add? Why did we need this?
You needed to see how cool Jabba's sail barge was. Or that wasn't even on a sail barge.
It wasn't even on the sail barge. It wasn't on the sail barge yet. I'm kind of with stuff like that. I'm indifferent because I grew up on Lofty Neck, you know, like I grew up on, you know, like that. That's like I love the more disco version. Like I think I love that version a lot because I just grew up on it. I think it looks aesthetically a little bit better just for me. I love the original Sice Noodles. That being said, I don't hate Jedi Rocks. It's just it's abrasive. It's abrasive, but it comes down to like it's like the artist wanting to do what he wants to do, which is I actually always wanted it to be more of like a more funny, humorous, like you know, straight up like it's an actual musical. It's a music song, like almost like a musical in the middle of a Star Wars movie. That was always my intention, but I never had enough money and the time to develop it. Now I do. I can do tech. Tech. Now I can do all that. So I'm going to do what the hell I want. I'll throw some pictures of Boba Fett to make you happy, and then and then I'm going to go with it. And I think I don't love it. I've accepted it, and I'm cool with it now. I just watched it before we came on the show, and
I forgot about it until I watched it again, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. It's fine. It's I like the Yuzum because the Yuzum is supposed to be from Endor, so it's kind of a cool little like, you know, thing from there. So that's neat. It also from Empire or from Star Wars Jedi. There's when it shows them prepping Jabba's palace, they actually put the Yuzum, like it shows them connecting the Yuzum to the ceiling or to the wall. So it's just hanging out there. So it's supposed to be like, you know, like a denizen or whatever of Jabba's palace, but actually it's like just standing there. It's just a dead puppet. It's like, you know, but I don't know if it's on. I don't know if it's in the original edit or not. If maybe it's barely in the background. I bet just kind of standing there. You can tell if it's even moving, but I don't think it is. I think it's just hanging out there. So that's why they grabbed the Yuzum. They said, "Hey, let's use this guy." And, so I thought, listen, it's not amazing. I'm a Max Rebo guy. I love Max Rebo. So like, it felt like he got the short change of it though. Cause to me, it's Max Rebo was more front and center in the Lofty Neck version. And in this one, he's kind of like, you know, but it's fine.
Max Rebo's been getting his day in the sun recently, like between Book of Boba Fett and there's just a little, Mike and I were just talking about it, but there's a little Max Rebo Easter egg in the Star Wars Visions Volume 2 in the Aardman Animations short. There's a little Max Rebo action in that one. I think I saw a thing recently too. Is like is he playing with his feet too?
Yeah,
like,
he doesn't have arms. He has like feet. That
just feet.
His feet are his arms. Yeah. So he has like he has no arms. He just has feet. So
I guess what it comes down for me is at this time was the same time Spielberg was editing the guns out of like E.T.
and then put him back.
So it was just like it was at the time of transition where all these movies were being like modified, and it's like, why? They were so good. Why are you changing them? That's what emotions it brings up in me.
You know, I think that is such a great, like, it is such a great debate because I think there's value in both, you know, like I'll bring up another artistic medium here. Well, the medium of film or not film, sorry, music. My buddy, you know, I grew up on Pearl Jam 10, the album, right? Like if you guys are any familiar with music at all, I used to be in bands, so I know like the ins and outs a little bit. I'm not like an expert by any means, but I know a decent amount about recording and all that kind of crap, you know. And it's just funny because when you listen to Pearl Jam 10, it's just like the mixing on that album is just weird. It's just weird, and it's great, but it's very much of its time for mainstream rock, you know. So like things are like not as loud as they need to be, and it's just not. Right. And Pearl Jam has a lot of like aggressive raw sounds that people at the time maybe when we listen to that record, we're like, that's not really Pearl Jam. So when they put out like, Vitology, it's like, what the hell is this? It's like, so they've always been there. But anyway, I say that because about a number of years ago, my buddy was telling me, we were just chatting one day, and we're talking about Pearl Jam. And he's like, yeah, man, listen to like the remaster. And when people say remaster, I'm always remixing remaster. I'm like, right? When I hear remaster, I'm like, you made some levels go up like a couple decibels. Big deal, right? Like, what is that? He goes, no. This is not a remaster. This is a full this is a remix, right? So we were talking, when you talk about remixing, that is a whole different animal. Mixing of an app that makes, for those who don't know, for layman's people out there, and I'm just no insult to whatever, but if you know what a mix is, the mix is like the heart of the song, essentially. Meaning like what do you hear prominently is what the mix is. Like, do the guitars go up? Does the bass down more? Is the drums, whatever, right? We listen to that album. I listened to the remix, the new mix that the band basically wanted to do a better job. It's almost not a completely different record, but it sounds radically different a lot.
Right.
And at the same time, I think it sounds effing amazing. I love 10, and I'm like, I love this, but I also will always have an affinity for that original recordings I listened to when I was a kid, and I love, right? Because there's something about like having lots of reverb on something that doesn't need to be there, but I grew up on it, right? So I say all that just to explain that when you look at, I do these things that these artists do now. Yes, I think you have to value and respect, because that's what they own. They have earned their right to modify what they want, because it's not my vision, it's their vision. I always have the previous one. And people will say like, whoa, how is it? Yeah, you can go online and get one. You can get these things. It's not like it's that hard. Let's be real here, y'all. But the thing is, like, there's value to that too, because you grew up on that. And I do feel like Disney and Lucasfilm they'll eventually do it. It's just inevitable. Probably when Lucas, I hate to say it, when he dies, that's probably when it will happen. Not like the day of, obviously, or the week after, but it's going to happen a couple of years after he probably passes. Out of respect, which I totally get. But at the same time, I feel like there's value to what George kept doing, because I just love the fact he always wanted to improve on it and try in his mind. It's a cool like artistic, like punk rock like thing about that I love. And at the same time, I'm also like, well, kind of like what I grew up on too. So I see value in both, and I think both are important. It just depends on what you prefer, and your preference is whatever. But I think people will be like, what, go back and do it? Well, it's because they can and they should, and doesn't mean they should ever detract from what you loved before either. So
I agree with all that.
I have the note here, like watching it again on its 40th anniversary, however I watched it, you still have to appreciate what they accomplished in 1983. Like, we're so desensitized to CGI these days that you watch this and it's like, oh, this is really bad by compared to like, but then if you think about it, it's like computers were barely a thing. And look what they did.
Yeah.
And it just blows my mind what they were able, like what inventions came from Star Wars, what for sound and visuals, like the literal creation maybe of tentpole movies where people are lined up around the block. Like what he was able to do back then is just astounding. No matter how bad you think the movie is, you have to put that in perspective.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And like one of the other things that, like, I even saw Mark Hamill like post about it again recently, like the other day with like during like the whole cell barge sequence with like Luke when he's like kicking
the ghost kick.
Yeah,
the force
kick,
kick or whatever.
He's like, this is a perfectly executed force kick. I'm using a force kick to kick. That's always just what I thought he was doing when I was a kid too. I was like, I didn't see any mistake.
I never saw it until like 5 years ago. So
I didn't know about it until Mark Hamill posted it.
I was like, God, don't do that to me. It's like when I watched the Batman '89 stuff with special features with Tim Burton, and he brought up the purple dot on Joker. That's right there when he reveals himself as the Joker, and it's this purple dot. And I was like, oh, and then even afterwards, like, now that I've told you, you'll never not see it again. And I was like, God damn it, Tim, you're right.
He's
because
like,
now I only see that when that scene happens.
He's like, if I have to live with this, so do you.
That's exactly why he did it. Is it bothered him for that long? It's like, I'm gonna make all you mother effers see the same thing I do. So,
but
exactly it.
So the next thing here too is that I know there's two different camps about the character of Boba Fett. That one, like, people actually like the character, or two, he's just aesthetically cool looking. But as, like, other than that, he's a cool action. Like, when I was a little kid, that's all I liked about Boba Fett. I was like, oh, this is a cool action figure.
We didn't know anything about him.
Yeah, but like, I wasn't like attached to that character at all, and like he goes out like such a chump in that movie. I mean, he didn't die, because if you watch Book of Boba Fett, he climbed out of the Sarlacc pit. But I've always liked that scene in Return of the Jedi where, like, he just gets, like, taken out so easily with, like, his jetpack, and he goes, like, flying into the sail barge and then falls into the Sarlacc pit with beak or without beak. Either way, it's fine. But I've always liked the way that the Boba Fett gets taken out in Return of the Jedi. What are your opinions, Paul, and then Mike?
I always feel bad because Mike, because I will talk forever. If you guys don't know any of my shows, it takes a lot to shut me up. So I
got a mute button. Don't worry.
Oh, excellent. Okay, just mute me and tell me to shut up when it's your turn. I was wanting to let you go first because I won't shut up. This is a loaded question, because the two camps. There's the one who opposes, obviously the opposing camp will always say he doesn't do anything. And you know what? Like, I don't think that really matters, to be quite honest, because I always say that Boba Fett carried Star Wars. I mean that, like, he carried Star Wars, like, I think from a merchandising, like, kind of standpoint, from basically 94 to about 99, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, like the Power of the Force collection.
What I mean, like, just in general, like, just because if you guys are, about a little about my age, it sounds like, but when I was a kid,
4 years older, younger. 4 years
younger. Okay, so I'm 41. I'm not sure when I was born in 82. So
86
when I was
for both of us.
Yeah, so when I was in middle school, Boba Fett was on everything. He was on T-shirts. He was front and center on every, like, he had his own miniseries, they were miniseries on Dark Horse, but they were basically like a 4-issue miniseries every, like, 3 times a year, which is basically an ongoing series, but whatever, right? I digress. But, like, you had tons of other random, like, merchandising, like mugs, toys, and let's see here, like, he was, like, literally he was all over the place. Shadows of the Empire, he was heavily all over, marketed on that, like, through the video game and for the books and the comics. Like, even though he's not even technically in Shadows of the Empire novel, he's on the freaking cover.
Yeah.
So he really did. I mean, besides, like, the main people, the big three and Chewbacca, whatever, like, he was Star Wars, and he helped carry without having a film. And they went to the well with that a lot. There's plenty of Star Wars stuff that I got from the mid-90s that Boba Fett's all over. And that's why he's all over the specialized editions as well, right? So because he's all over, they brought in that extra random scene in Empire. He's in A New Hope. He's in Return of the Jedi. Like, he is the unsung hero from the mid-90s. And people always will say, like, Boba Fett doesn't do anything. Well, yeah, you can say that all you want. And I think that's fair to say, but he was popular as hell, and he helped carry Star Wars through like the dark times, or from the dark times, or from 83 or about 84, 85 to like 94. Like, nothing carried Star Wars at that point, essentially. But when the dark times ended, that's when Boba Fett helped carry Star Wars to Phantom Menace. And people who say they just did, I'm sorry, you weren't there, or you just don't want to admit it. This is reality. Right. But
we wouldn't have the series we have on Disney Plus now without him, The Mandalorian.
Exactly. And there's a reason why Robert Rodriguez I mean, that's a whole different podcast, but Robert Rodriguez, but there's a reason why he loves him, and it's because he likes comics. He likes that stuff. Like Robert Rodriguez is a G, you know, even though I don't agree with everything he did aesthetically wise and Book of Boba Fett. He obviously liked what came out besides Return of the Jedi, and I think that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. So there's a couple of, the last thing I'll say, and I'll throw it to you, Mike. And again, I'm so sorry for talking way too long.
You're good. No, you take your time. You're so boxing.
No, thank you. I really do appreciate that. Other thing I remember too, I talked about George Lucas, you know, only focusing on at that moment. And, you know, if for those who don't know, Return of the Jedi, one of the reasons why it has what it has from a conclusion standpoint is because he was done making Star Wars at that time. He at the point before, so he got divorced during Jedi, I think during Jedi he was getting divorced, and he just adopted his first child. And at that time, when his wife and him were separated and about ready to divorce, he pretty much said, "I'm done. I want to take a break." And all the subplots he had that he was doing through Empire, he had to wrap all of them up in one movie. And Boba Fett was always one of the, again, I don't know. This is just me just kind of taking different things and things that he said later on. But my assumption is that he always was supposed to play a bigger part in somewhere in his mind, but it was never like, he never had it all planned out in his head, but he always had it there. And in how they developed him, because you look at like when Yoda says there's another in Empire, that was supposed to be literally a brand new character from Luke's sister was supposed to be a brand new character that he was supposed to go find after Jedi. But because he was like, I'm done making Star Wars, I'm done. He was like, I gotta wrap that subplot up. Leia.
That makes sense.
It makes sense. And so I say all that because Lucas at that time just needed to wrap things up. So Boba Fett, like I think Boba Fett is just kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of I can't think of the word right now, but he's an innocent bystander, you could say, of that what happened, because I don't think he didn't think he was
kind of like a casualty.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. He's a casualty of war, essentially. He's like, well, you know what? I can't really do anything with this afterwards, so I got to get rid of him. So, get him out of here. Let's have some fun with it. So I feel that's what happened. And then after him, adopting more kids and wanting to go back to Star Wars, that's when he went back and gave that whole Django, there's an interview with him from MTV if you can even look it online, if you Google special edition MTV special, whatever, if you just do something like that, you'll see like a half hour, 20-minute version of like all the big three doing modern interviews in the 90s with George. And George even said, like, I'll never forget it. He always says, I'm mystified by Boba Fett's popularity. And he says there, well, yeah, he does have importance in which he doesn't say what it is, but obviously the clones. But I don't think at the time that was ever the thing. But maybe it was. But regardless, he had to get rid of him really fast, because even then, I think he later on talked about he almost had a part where in the Jedi Special Edition where Boba Fett was going to walk out of the pit. Like he said he was really close to adding that in, but he didn't. So that I know I remember him saying, like, I almost had that, but I decided against it, which I'm glad he did, to be honest. But at the same time, when I was a kid, when the special editions came out, I would have loved that. But
that would have been like the equivalent of like an end tag scene.
Exactly.
For Return of the Jedi, you just see at the very end of the credits, you see Boba Fett climb out of the Sarlacc pit. So Boba Fett will return.
Yeah. So the last thing I will say is that he carried Star Wars I would say he carried himself, but he heavily helped Star Wars keep going to the prequel trilogy. And to me, justified his importance in the saga forever after that, because people just gravitate. You can't, because listen, you cannot predict what people will gravitate towards. You can't. If you did, you would do something with it, right? So when people gravitate towards a character, you just got to run with it. And I think people just gravitated towards Boba Fett, and it just kind of happened naturally. So it doesn't matter if he did anything in movies or not. The truth is, he's a big character because people gravitated towards him and liked him, and they emphasized his. And Lucasfilm leaned into it in the 90s. So he's important.
Nice. Mike?
I don't disagree. He is very important because, like I said, we wouldn't have the Mandalorian series without him.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, with the more the Mandalorian season reveals about the Mandalorian, for me, Boba Fett becomes this mystery. Is he a real Mandalorian? Did he go through all that? Or did he just like put his dad's stuff on because that's what he saw his dad wear? Just I don't know. Maybe someone might know. I just don't know. Because he's a clone of Jango Fett. But does that make him a Mandalorian just because he's the same person in a way? And for me, Book of Boba Fett kind of hurt Boba Fett personally, because that series, like, I was like torn by that series. But I remember watching these the first time I watched them, being like, just like, oh, that's a badass. Boba Fett's a badass as a kid. Like, I knew nothing about him.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't read the comics. I didn't do anything. I just remember being like, Boba Fett's a badass, to the point where until I moved jobs 2 jobs ago, I had a little Boba Fett figurine on my desk at work, and I misplaced that, unfortunately. Uh-huh. He was guarding my desk at all times. But it's just, the more that gets released on The Mandalorian, the more I rethink Boba Fett is where I'm at.
That's fair, though. I think that's a fair thing to say. Because basically the Mandalorian is Boba Fett. Like, he is.
Yeah. I feel like while you were talking, not to interrupt.
No, you're good. Yeah, go ahead.
I felt like this is what, like, Boba Fett, the Mandalorian is what Boba Fett's story was supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly.
But for whatever, like, because he was eaten, they couldn't do it until Robert Rodriguez was like, no, he can come out.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like, how the Mandalorian walks and talks is very much kind of what he is in Empire Strikes Back. And right. He's obviously not as, like, doesn't sound as like as emotionless as, or he's not as emotionless as Boba is, I would say, at that time. But that's the Mandalorian is, no doubt about it, the 90s Boba Fett that we all like loved, right. but just with a heart of gold, essentially, add that element. And he is, I mean, because Boba Fett, because if you don't make him a clone of Jango, that's who the Boba Fett is.
Right.
So I don't. So Boba Fett plays because he's a clone. But see, I like that. I like the fact that he's not this the Mandalorian character, because I do like there is a uniqueness to Boba Fett and that whole clone thing. It's just something cool about that. Like, Boba Fett is a clone, and it gives like a connection to the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy that is retroactive, but still it's cool that, like, oh, there's still a clone. You know what I mean? The whole Clone Wars thing, that all the clones or whatever, that's all represented with Boba Fett because he's there, right? So that's cool. Yeah, I think it was the thing with George, and again, Jedi is a great example of this. He just takes chances and doesn't care. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to full on, like, everyone expects, like, Boba Fett to be like, he's the guy, like, he's a Western, he's a Clint Eastwood with a helmet, blah blah blah. He's like, actually, no, he's actually going to be a clone of another guy. He's just gonna, there'll be millions of them, and it's like, but at the time, it's like kind of a bummer, because again, that expectation, right?
Right.
But as you get older and you start looking and you start realizing, like, yeah, that probably is a lot more, like, it's not as predictable. And, like, as a creative person myself, in a very small, like, in music or like in my own comic writing, whatever, like, I can tell you that I mean, in a very small way, that I can respect and understand why someone would be like, no, I don't want to do I don't want to go the route everyone wants me to, because
it's better to have something that is personal to you.
Exactly.
Don't feed them, like, don't cater to the masses in a sense. Like,
and
make it yours, and then people will accept it eventually.
And think about this. And because he went that route, we get the Mandalorian. And I think that's a much better story. I'd much rather prefer, let's just assume that, like, if he's not a clone, that the Mandalorian in this alternate universe we'd be living in, that would be Boba Fett. It wouldn't be as impactful, I think, to be honest. You know, it's like all of a sudden, like, Boba Fett's a good guy, which they try to do. Well, they try to do that a little bit in this with this whole gangster angle. But I mean, I gotta tell you, there's, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but I would say there's parts of Book of Boba Fett that I think are brilliant, straight up brilliant. That second episode is an all timer, man. Like, I love that episode. I straight up love
I have to go back and watch it because I was so, like, I enjoyed it. I talked down to it because I was like, but Boba Fett was up here for me. Like,
sure,
he was my, like, all time, like, that guy's just so awesome. And again, it comes down to the expectations thing we keep talking about. I was like, Book of Boba Fett's going to just be this amazing, badass story, which it was, but it didn't meet what I thought of Boba Fett.
It had weak moments. But I would say the episode that I'm talking about
has weak moments.
Of course. And the thing is, like, when you look at, like, the episode where Boba Fett's, like, he's not in costume, but he's just learning the ways of the Tusken Raiders, and the very end where he's dancing with them, I was like, I thought that was people, and more people I talk to who don't like that series, they tend to always agree, like, yeah, that episode was pretty good. Like, and that to me, so, like, the first episode's fine, it was fun. That second episode's what sold me on it, and the third episode's not good. The whole middle is not great. The last couple episodes, I mean, obviously the Mando episodes, you could say, are great, obviously, but I think the last episode's pretty good too. I think it's not like, all timer, but it's really good. It's really good. So
yeah,
Boba Fett rides a Rancor. What can you say? I mean, come on.
Yeah, for me at least, to wrap up the Boba Fett talk before we get to the next bit.
Mark's gonna mute us.
No, it's just that I think the Filoni's Clone Wars animated series helped me with Boba Fett a lot too, because it helped expand a lot of like what he wanted as a character to, and, like, because he's a clone of his dad, and because the clone armies are all of his dad, like, that's kind of gives him, like, another reason for wanting to be, like, his own person because of that. So I liked that whole aspect of with the Clone Wars, with like Boba Fett being expanded upon there, and being able to, just get a little bit more agency.
Is, how did he become a Mandalorian? Did he go through the ritual, or is it just the transitive property? He just, my dad was a Mandalorian. I'm my dad technically, so I'm a Mandalorian. Yeah.
And then, like, the next thing that I had wanted to talk about was just like it's kind of like a brief thing, just that I thought was kind of interesting, that I had noticed before, is, like, throughout New Hope, then Empire, then Return to the Jedi, with basically how Obi-Wan appears to Luke. So, like, after, like, Luke, or not after Luke, but after Obi-Wan has died in A New Hope, and Luke's kind of just at that point first becoming kind of learning the ways of the Force. He can only hear Obi-Wan's voice at that point, but not, like, see, like, a visual representation of Obi-Wan. And then in Empire, he kind of sees a little bit more of, like, he sees a ghost, Force ghost of Obi-Wan, that's a little bit more, like, like, faded out, more translucent and whatnot. And then as he gets even more kind of learning the ways of the Force by Return of the Jedi, like, Obi-Wan's almost, he's not corporeal, whatever. He's not like, he can't, he's not like, you can't physically touch him yet, but he basically looks like Obi-Wan of A New Hope, just with like a blue glow around him at that point. So I don't know if it's, I think it's been like a theory where it's just basically as Luke kind of becomes more attuned to the Force through those 3 movies, that's how he's better able to see Obi-Wan and the way that Obi-Wan appears to him after he's died in A New Hope.
They kind of touch on that in the Obi-Wan series with Qui-Gon. It's like, now that you're ready, I can teach you the rest of this.
But I've been here the entire time. The entire time? But you've been the entire time I was in that cave by myself? But yeah, that was just something that I thought was kind of randomly interesting, just about the way that like Luke can see or hear Obi-Wan, like his Force ghost connection throughout like the original trilogy, and like how after it becomes like, and where the whole
you
certain
only
point
see
of view,
Force ghosts of your master, or can like just random Jedi like, hey, I'm this guy, I'm a
or
ghost
people
too.
that you have some kind of connection with, since he only sees Obi-Wan, Yoda, and his dad. So yeah,
it's an interesting concept, the Force ghost. Because I remember an interview where there was talk of making Harrison Ford come back as a Force ghost, but he has no.
I don't want to get into Rise of Skywalker, but like he kind of is maybe a Force ghost in Rise of Skywalker.
He's not. I wouldn't say it's a Force ghost
or just like a Force vision.
I was, I would, man. I could go on for days about Rise of Skywalker in a good way. Like I'm like its biggest defender, which I will go to war with anything about Rise of Skywalker, and I have. So, I would say that was a little different because Leia's sacrifice is tied with that. So I think she knew where he was at the time, and she kind of knew and that's why her death, people always complain about, oh, it doesn't make sense. And like part of it, I understand why people don't like it, because that part a lot, because it doesn't make sense. But I always say I don't need a PowerPoint presentation of like how the Force works for me to like know like what's going on. And like the same thing with what happened in A New Hope, right? When Obi-Wan disappears, like why are people gonna be pissed off about that? What's going on? I don't know what's going on with this. Like that's my biggest thing about it. It's like, well, were you up in arms about that? Right. I mean, so it's out of nowhere. Doesn't make any sense. And so but you take it on face value because you're a freaking kid I'm assuming when you're watching it. So that anyway. So I think that is more tied with Leia's sacrifice. And I think not saying that she brought Han from the dead, but I think she brought like that, like a memory, like something like that, and is using that because that's what Han would say essentially, right? Like it's almost like a Force vision. Maybe a vision is probably a good way of doing it. So it's not Han per se, but it's his what is what do they like in the Superman? What does Jor-El say? It's his not his conscience, but it's like you know what I mean? Like something like that. It's like his something like that, where it's like it's not him per se, but it's like his like everything else, whatever. So
his essence.
Yeah, his essence is Han's essence essentially. So yeah, I don't prescribe that. I love the theory. I think it's great. I don't know if that's intentional. Does that make sense? You could retcon it and have it work, and I think that's cool. And I'd be totally fine if Lucasfilm decided to do that. But I don't think that was ever. Again, Lucas isn't thinking that far. I love him. I love him to death, but he's not thinking. He's not that like ahead of. If he was, he would never have sold Star Wars to Disney and.
It's the one with all the deaths in Star Wars for the Jedi. There's a meme that floats around with Yoda when he dies about it's a parenting one.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a great one, man. Oh my god.
It's like as a parent, I totally understand why after 9,000 questions, Yoda was just like, yeah, I'm out. Like, the more my daughter gains cognitive ability and is thinking more, the more I'm like, you gotta stop with the questions. Give me 10 minutes to answer all of them before you ask another one.
I feel you. My daughter's the same. She's 3. I'm the same way, man.
And like, I'm glad you have all these questions. I'm so excited, but you just asked 130 seconds.
Awesome. But yeah, it's a lot.
And then, so like the other thing that I really liked in Return of the Jedi is like the whole speeder bike sequence that we get on the Forestmen of Endor. And like when I went to San Francisco a few years ago, back in like 2017, and I made sure that we went to Muir Woods, just because I knew like parts of the film had been shot there, and I wanted to be able to go to Endor basically. So like when we did go to there, I was like geeking out the entire time, just like walking around the forest there, be like, man, I'm on freaking Endor.
You were like Ben from Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Were you no? Forgive me, because I've traveled to that area quite a bit, like number of times. Is Muir Woods in the Redwoods, or is that the one close to like the grounds of Lucasfilm?
It's it's closer to Lucasfilm.
Okay, I think I hiked that area with my buddy a while back. But the Redwoods itself, like there was a lot of that place is gone. A lot of the filming locations are gone. They burned down.
Yeah.
Or they chopped them down or whatever. It's something weird like that. I think there are a couple places that they did film some scenes from, and like there's one where I don't know if it was a speeder bike, but I want to say it was something like that, where for my bachelor party, we actually went to Redwoods and went to Endor. And
nice.
There was a time where my wife and I also went a different time too, but there was one time where we went to it's like a little trail. It's very out of nowhere, but it's like the best way I can explain it, it's called a park, you could say, or whatever. But you walk in and it's a little trail, and it's just a circular trail, but trees are ginormous, and you feel like you're in Endor, like or you're in a fantasy of something. It's so cool, man. If for people out there, I forgot what the park's called. I've gone there a couple times, and every time I go there, I start grinning, because it definitely I could see them filming scenes from Red Jedi there. If it wasn't used, right. I'm pretty sure it was. It could have been used easily. But yeah, the Redwoods it's incredible. I love it. I always want to go back and camp there. I love the Redwoods. So yeah, Endor, I call it Endor. Endor is amazing. So but yeah, Muir Woods.
They should just change it to Endor.
That'd be rad. I'd be all about it.
And then like the next thing that like once they're on Endor that I like in the movie too is like when 3PO kind of basically does like his recap of Star Wars up until that point.
So good.
And he has like a soundboard basically essentially of what's happened there. So he's got like Darth Vader's sound effect in there. He's got lightsaber sound effect. I was like has 3PO just been recording this like audio this entire time?
Probably.
Well, I mean, Darth Vader is probably his vocals got to be available to the mass public of the galaxy, because he's Darth Vader. I mean, he's not like an underground entity, he's known.
If you look at their chest plates, they're similar. Just one's gold plated, one's black and silver knobs. They're similar looking.
I mean, Vader is 3PO's dad.
He did make them, true. He could have put that voice in there, and then later he's like, "Oh, I already know a perfect voice for when."
Yeah. Like the other thing too with the Ewoks is just that Wicket rules, and I am glad that that they brought Wicket back for Rise of Skywalker as well too, and that like Warwick Davis even was able to bring in, I don't remember which one of his kids it was, but that he was able to
his son,
have his son in there with him as like Wicket's son within the the movie too. And then just because of how like popular Wicket became from Return of the Jedi, they ended up doing the two live action Ewok like TV movies with Wicket. And then they also did the animated Ewok series too.
Mm-hmm. Ewoks were one big happy family.
Available on Disney Plus. Hopefully, still maybe not.
Oh, God, don't even get me started on that crap. Don't even get me started. Yikes.
Yeah. I have it. I have that on DVD. I bought that animated series on DVD back when they put all of that stuff out.
Well, not all of it. It's only certain episodes. So, but Disney, yeah.
Mark's pissed now.
Well, trust me, like when they released it on DVD, it was like I was so excited. I snatched that up so quick because I knew, because both the Ewok films and the droids and Ewoks cartoon like thing, I snatched those mothers up so quick, man. I was like, I ain't letting these go back. Are you kidding me? Like, these are big deals, man. So, yeah. No, I listen. I've on Twitter. I've rant and raved about the Ewok films. Mainly, Battle for Endor is my jam. Like that is, I'll hold that up. I'd watch that over Last Jedi any day of the week. Like nice. I think the movie's so much better. I'll watch Battle for Endor so much. I love that movie. It's so good. Teak, dude. Teak's the MVP. He's the GOAT, greatest of all time. So
what's kind of depressing is the Ewok movie that comes after that, which is because they just killed off all of the characters from.
Do you know why they do it? Do you know why?
No.
See, it goes back to George being just a crazy dude. So George. This is why I always say George only focuses in on like what he's doing at the time. He's not thinking about he's very loosely thinking down the line. So he creates this movie, right? The Caravan of Courage, solid, fun family movie, TV movie, not the greatest looking thing, but for what it is, pretty impressive. Back in the day, 84 when it came out, or 85, So that comes out, and it's like a moderate success, but they want to make another one. Well, George is watching the TV series Heidi with his daughter, which is about an orphan and an old man. So what does he do? Well, while we were watching Heidi, so I wanted to make it more like that. So he just offs the entire family. like that's literally why Noah exists, is because he was watching Heidi with his daughter and wanted to emulate that and like in honor of her. Like, I'm just going to off all these people, like Eric Walker, who's Mace. I'm just going to, which I loved Mace as a kid. Like, I identify because he's a young kid, He always seemed like he was like that older. He was older than me, but he was kind of, like, he's still a kid. He gets destroyed. Like, nah, I don't care about you. I don't care about this. There's something about the guts of doing that, of you, because he's like the main character of the first movie. And it's crazy to me that he's like, yeah, I don't care. I'm just gonna, here you go. Like, there's something so punk rock about George Lucas that I love and also hate. It's just like it's so reckless. But yeah, that's why the whole family gets killed, is because he wants to emulate Heidi for his daughter. In essence, it's crazy.
Yeah. Just like killing characters named Mace.
Well, and Mace, the name Mace was also the original like protagonist of Star Wars. It was first draft, so it was Mace Windu was his name.
Oh, jeez.
So I heard that actually, yeah.
Yeah, and so Mace, and the thing with Lucas, he'd always save names and things from his earlier drafts, like Utapau was another name that he had saved from his early drafts and never made it in until the prequel trilogy. But Mace was always a name that he saved, and then that's why he used it for one of the first things after, for the Caravan of Courage, and then he reused it again for, the actual Mace Windu. Well, that was interesting, but George, man, it's crazy old guy.
Right. And then so like the next thing I just want to touch on really quick is when I went to Celebration 3 in 2005. They had Barry Holland there, who's the actor who played Renz in Return of the Jedi. The dude that says "You rebel scum." Mm-hmm. So like, I think that was the first time like I had met anybody that was like Star Wars movies. So even though it was like this like smaller part in the movie, I thought it was like super cool. It was just like one of the first things that I can remember, as far as, because at that same celebration, I think like a day or two later, I met like Peter Mayhew and Billy D. Williams. I had like I still have like this like bad memory of like the whole interaction with Billy D. Williams too.
Why is that not shocking?
I don't know if he was just having like a bad day or whatnot. So like I'll give him grace for that, but just because I don't know what he was going through that day. But I just remember like the day that I interacted with him was I don't know, he just didn't seem like he wanted to be there.
Does not surprise me.
Well, it's like what I've heard about Christopher Lloyd. If you go to a convention and he's not there for Back to the Future and you mention it, he gets pissed. I've heard he I'm not talking about that today, or like he snaps at people. I've seen many stories about that. Like if he's brought to a convention for some other role other than Back to the Future, he won't talk about it and gets mad if you try to, or he has to be in the mood to talk about Back to the Future.
With
I
him,
hate interacting with celebrities.
I was going to say with Christopher Lloyd, I have a very different memory, because when he came to Phoenix Comic-Con years ago and I was getting my Back to the Future poster signed, he leaned down to my son and just said, "Great Scott." And I was like, man, that's gonna be like a core memory now. Just because like I didn't ask him to do that. He just saw my son standing there. He leaned down, shook his hand, and said, "Great Scott" to him. I was like, man, that's like Christopher Lloyd's awesome. And then and now he's the man DeLorean.
He's something.
Wow. Wow.
Yes. That being said, and a good segue from talking about my son, is that the stuff that I really like the most in Return of the Jedi is a lot of the stuff that deals with Luke and Vader's like father and son relationship. That's definitely expanded upon from like once like Lucas found out that Vader's his dad in Empire, and I like basically like it being like Luke's whole mission to go and try to essentially save his dad from the Emperor, and like feeling that there's good in him, just the same way that like Padme like had said in Revenge of the Sith that like she knew that there's still good in him somewhere. Granted, we then have the scene of Leia and Luke, like Luke sharing that their brother and sister, and she's like, I know, I've always known her. Like, did you know all the time though? Because you were just.
Granted, they had just met moments before. They didn't really know each other yet. They hadn't interacted much.
You guys are making out a movie ago, so
that was one time. I mean,
there is that deleted scene supposedly where they kiss again.
I do like the edit though, where when Leia tells Han that Luke is her brother, and she kisses him, and then it's that shot of Han like with like the different like facial kind of like movements to that, and then I don't remember, it's like that music's like and it like shows him flashing back to Empire with them kissing, and he's like, oh wait, what? So I just like that funny aspect to it. But I like all the father and son stuff with Luke and Vader in this, and just like with like the different conversations that like Vader and him are having as they're going up to the Emperor, and you can kind of see like with like Vader actually does kind of like want to work with his son. Like at that point, it's still kind of like more that he wants to like he like wants to be like Sith master and apprentice together with him at that point. But I just like all of the stuff near like the end of this movie with Luke and Leia, or not Luke and Leia, Luke and Vader, and like all the father and son relationship stuff that comes from that here later in the movie.
Doesn't Vader, if memory serves, Luke goes to kill the Emperor and Vader stops him, right?
Yeah, but I think that's also partly because
it's because he's protecting the Emperor. I guess.
Yeah, he's protecting the Emperor. Yeah. So good.
Yeah. I was gonna say, and I know there's like other like theories where like he's protecting the Emperor, but he's also trying to protect Luke from falling to the dark side at that point. But that I don't
prescribe
because
to that.
he doesn't really make that choice until
I didn't either. I was just thinking about it while you were talking about the father-son stuff.
Yeah, because I don't see it because he doesn't really like make that choice until like he sees like the Emperor just like frying Luke,
and then he just grabs him and throws him.
You know, and one of the things that people talk about with the Star Wars and think of the greater lore aspect, you know, because people always say like, well, Luke didn't train that much or whatever, which I think is again fair assessment. The way they establish it, with Lucas himself establishes in like the original, you know, from the prequel trilogy. When I was watching it today, and maybe I'm just mega slow and dumb, but it kind of dawned on me because, you know, if you look at what they talk about the trials, right, for the Jedi, from a Padawan to become a Jedi, and what are the trials? And it just kind of dawned on me, well, duh, Vader is Luke's trial. Like that is, so that's why when Luke's like, you know, when Yoda's like, you don't need no more training, bro, you know, and he's like, well, I'm a Jedi. He's like, well, hold on a second, you gotta defeat Vader still. He doesn't say it's his trial, but that's essentially what like it is, right? But, you know, every Jedi has to go through that one trial to kind of like they become greater for one afterwards, right? And that's his trial, which is really cool. And I'm sure people have already talked about this. I'm not trying to act like I'm like some great like epiphany of, you know, I'm not like Eureka, you know, or but I will say that it kind of dawned on me at that moment, like, oh yeah, that's his trial, and that makes sense in the context of the greater lore. That, you know, like when Obi-Wan says in the Phantom Menace, he's like, I'm ready for the trials, you know, and then like, actually, we're a bureaucracy, the Jedi Order. We tell you if you're ready, Obi-Wan, and it's like so stupid. And I love that the fact that like Lucas is based in a very obvious way for the mainstream audience, because the mainstream audience, no offense to y'all, are not all the smartest people in the world who get this stuff, but like he's showing you why the Jedi Order is dumb too, like, and why they're corrupt and dumb, and how Palpatine gets into power, because he's not completely wrong, you know. So like he's right to an extent. He just perverts the truth, right? So but all that to be said is that the truth remains, for you to graduate from someone who is to become a Jedi, you have to go through that massive trial to really prove that you are who you are. And I think that like that's obviously what Vader is. It's his trial, you know, and in a very like big trial, and that's like the trial of like the fate of the galaxy. But it is his trial to become a Jedi, and I think that's really interesting to think about it when you look at things from now. When you look at all the context of like the books, the comics, and the movies that have come out before and whatever, when you look at that aspect, you're like, oh, that's kind of a cool thing. Like it retroactively fits. You know what I mean? Like it was really cool, which I have a theory for, like a Rise of Skywalker thing in the High Republic, like retroactively, which I don't think is nearly intentional, which I thought they could totally build off of, but it's retroactively after the fact. You could build on it because what's come before and after, all that crap. So but yeah, same thing. I think it's just cool to kind of see that aspect of Luke as like Vader. It's Luke's Jedi trial was his own father, which is again a big deal, but it's still like it's different in that aspect, but still in that same frame. You could say it's arguably in that same frame that like they talk about in previous the canon or lore.
You could, echoing that and putting it on Vader, you could say the same thing about him for what we saw in Obi-Wan, the series, how he still can't beat him. And then in the opening of A New Hope, not opening, but in A New Hope, he battles Obi-Wan again, and then we see him defeat him. You could say that was his trial, and that's Obi-Wan basically like...
That was, yeah. Well, because the Force Ghost, I don't know if you guys watch the Clone Wars at all, but like if you watch that last Yoda arc, which is I think some of the best Star Wars ever created, and I mean that 100%. That's phenomenal. it's about obviously Yoda becoming a Force ghost, and how do you become a Force ghost, right? Like Yoda, like he goes, and I freaking love that stuff, right? The Force mystical, give it to me, just inject it in my veins. But what's the last episode called? It's called Sacrifice. And like during that time, Yoda, like they don't say outright what Yoda, like what the Force priestesses say to him. Like they don't say like what he, but they basically say like you learned what it was, and what it is. If you watch, it's sacrifice. That's how you become a Force ghost, is through sacrifice. I mean, there's training, I think, obviously beforehand, but sacrifice is the key, because that's what Yoda sacrifices himself in a sense, in that one instance, because they basically show him what's going to happen, and he's like, oh, I gotta sacrifice a lot in myself. I have to go off and be isolated and sacrifice that and all these people, because I can't, if I don't, then people are gonna, then we're done.
Yeah.
And essentially his dying breath is sacrificing himself to like tell Luke what you need to do to like do things, right? So he sacrifices in different, like you could say, in different ways, but Obi-Wan sacrifices himself to save Luke, right? He goes and just gets killed. Eventually, the Qui-Gon thing's a little different because it shows up later on, but I'm just going by off of what he kind of was the crux of everything, because he said his training wasn't complete. So maybe he obviously gets it later on, but then through that, you have Luke becomes a Jedi ghost through sacrifice in Last Jedi, still by coincidence. So, and obviously Anakin, through sacrificing himself for his son, becomes a Force ghost. So, and that the last episode of this Clone Wars where Yoda learns is called Sacrifice. So that's how you become a Force ghost. It's all there, even Leia sacrifices herself, right? Like again, at the end of Rise of Skywalker, she shows up and she's a Force ghost. So that is the key of the Force ghost. And I like that. That's the emphasis of what Vader does, right? Vader sacrifices himself, and that's how he learns and he becomes one with the Force through that, which I thought was really fascinating and really, really interesting. And again, in retrospect, because that was not, I don't think that was intentional. I think that was all developed later on as it went. Kind of like we talked about earlier too with the Force ghost, like how the Force gets stronger and stronger for Luke. You could go back and retroactively say that's what happened, but yeah, like that is definitely what they've been painting the picture of. Like this is all retroactively, like sacrifice is how you you keep your consciousness within the Force.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue to like move into like the last two things we'll talk about from Return of the Jedi as we kind of wrap up talking about it, is like with Vader sacrificing himself for Luke to save his son. This is kind of like a debate between like the special edition and the original versions of the movie too. Is like, do you prefer Sebastian Shaw as the older version of Anakin at the end of the movie, or are you okay with Hayden as Anakin at the end of the movie when Luke looks over and he sees Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin over there smiling over at him and celebrating the fact that the Palpatine for now is gone? I'll go with you, Mike, because I know I can see like your notes for it first, and then have Paul go.
Well, my whole thing is I'm fine with Hayden Christensen being edited in. Fine. Why didn't they age him up?
Which side note to that is that Hayden Christensen didn't even know that was going to be happening, because I remember him in some interview where he was watching the movie for the first time when they re-released those on. It was a change that was done in one of the DVD releases after Revenge of the Sith. And he said he was watching the movie and he was like, oh, I guess I'm in Return of the Jedi now. Because it's like some like random shot of him that they had from some alternative take within the movie that they had placed his head up. But I just remember he was as surprised as everybody else when that initial DVD release came out and he was in Return of the Jedi at that point. But go ahead.
No, it was just like it's just strange that they didn't think to age him up a little. But the whole thing for me comes down to the religion aspect, because I have this strong memory in Sunday school. All of a sudden we're talking about death. I don't know, like that was the lecture of the week was death. And the teacher, the lady teaching it was like, just so you know, when you die, you get to pick what you look like. Whatever form you think you look like, God will make you look as best as you ever looked, and that's what you'll look like in heaven. And I was just like so confused by that, and it stuck with me because it's such a strange concept that God's so vain that he's going to make you look aesthetically pleasing to be in heaven.
They kind of did that in that movie, What Dreams May Come, that Robin Williams movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man,
they kind of did that idea.
When I see Anakin, Hayden Christensen in that scene, I was like, it just brings that memory back, and I laugh. So I expect them to change it and age it up at some point, but I'm fine with it changing. I just was always curious why he wasn't aged, because Luke doesn't know who that guy is technically. Really, he's never seen him like that.
fair.
He understands it from context, but
I think it makes more sense with Hayden in context of the whole saga. I think again, we're used to Sebastian Stan. It's fine. You could do either one, but I just think in the context of the great, especially with the Obi-Wan series, it just makes way more sense to have Hayden and that Hayden.
At this point, like it's fine.
Yeah, I to be honest, I never cared that much about that. I thought that was people were getting all people. Here's the thing: if everyone loved, like, if Hayden was predominantly loved, then no one would give a one crap about it. Right. But because we had the I'd say more episode 2 than episode 3. People try to crap on him in episode 3, but that definitely wore off over the years. People, even before the Obi-Wan series, people were like, yeah, Hayden Christensen was pretty good in Revenge of the Sith. And I always defended him for the most part. There's a couple parts where it's like he's a little rough, but it's not because of him. It's because that's what George wanted. Like when he's like, help me help Padme. I just can't live without her. Like that's all. That's not Hayden. That's George. You know, I mean,
that's where I've come to over the years. Is Lucas is like, yes, this is good.
Yeah, and that's more of like the episode 2, right? But if you watch the rest of the movie, he's fun. He's great. He's so good in the movie. Like he is. Even some of the lines where he's like, you know, there's when he's fighting Obi-Wan, they're kind of like a little bit cringe, a little bit, not complete, but kind of cringe. Like, I don't know, like, it still work because Hayden delivers it well. And I've always said that. Listen, you could tell me that George is not a great director of talent, but that's fine. Like, I can agree to that. But, like, great acting overcomes bad direction. And Ewan McGregor did not have people say that he was bad in those movies. No one ever told me that. Everyone said, well, Ewan was good. He was directed by the same people. He was directed. And I would say Natalie Portman was actually pretty good in episode 1. In episode 2 and 3, she's garbage, in my opinion. She's bad. And it's because she didn't care. And again, part of that's on George, part of that's on her. But Ewan, he's good in all of it. Friggin' Liam Neeson, whatever his name is, he's just fine as Qui-Gon. No one complains about him, do they? So great actors overcome bad direction and like not the great, you know what I'm saying? Like they and I look at the original 3, the big 3, they all overcame bad directing from George Lucas, you know? So good actors, the right characters, they will transcend that whole thing, right? And Hayden, the characters wasn't what people wanted him to be. And so people rebelled against him. But Revenge of the Sith, because of episode 2, people were like, nah. And so when he shows up in Return of the Jedi, they're like, nah, you know, and now people don't care as much because they realize, oh, Hayden's actually pretty good in episode 3. He's pretty good.
Yeah, you can apply the same to Jar Jar Binks. Like everyone was so anti him, but it's what Lucas wanted. Like, he could have changed it at any point in time, and this is what he was like. Nope, this is good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then like the one other thing about the ending to the movie too. So like in the special edition and then the original version, like in the special edition we get like more of like a kind of galaxy wide like celebration, like celebrating like the Emperor being taken down. Like Coruscant now has the Jedi Temple and the Senate in it, where it didn't before, because now they existed in the prequels. And then like you see Naboo in there in the celebration as well too, and a random Gungan saying "We's free," which just gotta assume who that could be. But I like that expanded upon celebration, just kind of showing like galaxy wide, like everyone just celebrating like the Emperor being taken down, like his statue being torn down in Coruscant. I don't know like how fast that news is traveling, but like I do miss Yub Nub in like the special edition version of it, but you can still listen to Yub Nub if you have the soundtrack and listen to it that way, or if you still have like
go online,
yeah, or like best like you can, if you find the specialized editions, you can watch it that way, or like Best Buy did do like a DVD release, yeah, like where like bonus features are like the original versions of the movie though. So I mean, there's ways to.
They're Laserdisc versions too. They're not even great. They're not even great transfers.
But yeah, I mean, I like that expanded upon ending just because I like just kind of seeing like how far widespread like that celebration is at the end of it, and then it kind of makes like when you watch Return of the Jedi, it actually makes it a little bit somber now too, and like knowing like that's not like the end of like they didn't like take down like an evil empire like group of people for good at that point.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes it a little bit, I guess, less joyous, but like you're like, well, at least for a little while it'll be good. But,
yeah, you know, I mean, I've seen people I think that's a fair argument. It's a fair point to bring up regarding the ending, but at the same time, it's not reality. I think in like real world, but also
it's not a definitive end to like.
Yeah, because we're a brand, man. It's a brand, and it's just I've accepted the fact that like as a brand, it's a never ending story. Cue the music, you know. It's like it is reality, and if you accept that, you have to accept that that's the end for that moment in time of that lore, you know. And I think that's just kind of. I mean, you know, I don't know if you guys ever watched or ever read the comic Watchmen, but you know, people there's always like people always try to say like nothing lasts forever, and there's truth to that. But at the very end of Watchmen, when spoiler if you guys haven't read Watchmen, you guys, it's not like a big deal, but it's really important. I'll just say this: at one point, a very powerful character says to the antagonist of the comic, he says to them, "Nothing ever ends," and then goes away. And so, I think that's very fascinating. Basically, because you can interpret that in so many different ways. And I going back to Star Wars, it's that same kind of thing. Like nothing ever really ends. Like it's all continuously a circle, you know, and history tells us that, you know, sometimes that circle may take a long time to get to that other point, right? But nothing ever. That's how I interpreted that saying, and that I apply that to these brands like Star Wars and Marvel and DC, especially Marvel and Star Trek. You know, I'm not a Star Trek fan at all, but Star Wars is that whole thing, like nothing ever really ends. I saw that. And you know, and I think that when I apply that whole idea to like Star Wars, it's like, yeah, it makes sense because there's always going to be evil in the galaxy. So it's like it's because like Luke defeats evil the one time doesn't mean it's going to go away, right? And so, you know, I don't I see that I totally get why people are bummed about that whole part, because there's not really a happy ending for those characters. And I think that is where I understand and can, like, I wish they wrote and figured that out better overall. And from start to finish. And I'm not even the Last Jedi bash, like completely from the beginning. Like they should have figured that out way sooner and should have waited instead of like, we gotta rush this out because we just spent $4 billion on this.
Right.
You know, I mean, like, which again, I understand that aspect too. We're in commerce, man. This is capitalism, you know. So but at the same time, I get both sides. So it's just it's like I said, nothing ever really ends. So Star Wars is just never going to end, and you have to accept that and know there's always going to be like a conflict, and we're gonna, you know, figure it out. So yeah.
Nice. All right. And then as we wrap up, was there any like tangential things that we didn't touch on that you guys want to bring up or just kind of touch on quickly as we wrap out? Mike or Paul?
Hit the main stuff.
We covered everything worth covering. Like, I just, with the advent of Bad Batch and them rescuing that Rancor off that one planet, it just makes you think, oh, poor Munchie got rescued to go get killed by Luke. But
I don't think that they didn't confirm that's Munchie, by the way. I think there was misunderstanding.
They didn't confirm it, but it's just like that's because he was going to Jabba. And
yeah,
it's a good name if it is Munchie, because he did get munched under the door.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Which
died like Yaddle.
Side note: Bad Batch season 2 way better than season 1. It's gonna say it right now.
That's true.
So, I love season 2. Loved
it.
With that. No, I would just say that I think that Return of the Jedi is just like, I'm just gonna say it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen that movie more than I think I've seen any other movie, and it is definitely. And I said it on my Twitter a couple of months ago, or a couple of days ago, and I said like, that movie changed the course of my life, because because of Return of the Jedi, I became a Star Wars fan. Because I became a Star Wars fan, I became a diehard Star Wars fan, and I became like so inundated with it that I started podcasting about it, and I got to know certain people, and those certain people became like deeply connected and close to me. And I lost one of them a couple of years ago, and it was devastating. And it was, and we both bonded over Return of the Jedi, and like he, John was an amazing person, and I'm just, he's my brother, and I miss him like crazy. But Return of the Jedi is a big reason why we became brothers, and why we became Star Wars fans, I mean, to an extent, or not even Star Wars fans, diehard, like, Star Wars fans. And it is the reason why I podcast and why I'm here right now, not just because of this particular topic, but because of in general in Star Wars. I'm here because of Return of the Jedi, essentially. I would say you could lump Empire in there, but to me, Jedi was, because growing up, I got bored sometimes with Jedi because it's not action packed. I love it, but even as a kid, I was like, I kind of fast forward sometimes because I'm ADHD. I can't help it. But Jedi, I could watch I'd watch it all the way through, no problem. And so Jedi is the movie that I grew up loving. The first movie I loved from minute to end, from start to finish. And I love it to death, and it's why I love Star Wars, and I'm very much blessed and glad it exists.
Nice. Off of that, I will just kind of say that is one of the reasons that I personally love movies in general so much, just because of how, like, whether it is Star Wars or Back to the Future or the Marvel movie or whatever it is, and like how it can bring different people together that might not necessarily talk to each other for any other reason other than they have a shared love and passion for.
That's why going to the theater is essential.
Yeah. So
because you're in that moment of time with the person next to you, and you can't take it away.
Yeah. Yeah, and like when you were saying that, like, that I could like really like feel all of that, and it made me that's why I liked the time that we shared working together at the movie theater. Mike and I, even if working at the movie theater wasn't itself all of that awesome, working at a movie theater was awesome. If that makes sense. But yeah, so
I'd go back if it paid well.
Yeah,
I'd do it.
And that was also still when you had to thread the film through the projector, and it wasn't just like a CD or a hard drive that you had to place into the digital projector. But yeah, that's a good way to wrap it out too. Is that's why we also do the Holdo Maneuver too. Is that we love Star Wars, we love movies, we like talking to other people that share those interests about the stuff that we like, whether it's Star Wars or anything else. And I like having that kind of communal experience, like with having like you on the show, Paul, or like any other guests that we've had on, like in the past, like almost 50 episodes. I like just being able to like have that shared experience and passion for something with people and being able to enjoy that with one another. So even though the loudest voice for a lot of the Star Wars fans online nowadays can sometimes be that of like the vitriol kind of Star Wars fan, they tend to have the loudest voice, but I still think the majority of Star Wars fans are like this, and like our friends over at like Live Action Star Wars, that like spreading like the love of Star Wars and like the passion for it and the kindness and everything that like Star Wars teaches about like different thing in it when talking about it, rather than the other side of it, which is more Sith-like. So
I don't even think it's Sith-like. I think it's done for, I want to argue with someone. This is very easy topic to get in an argument with. It's done to fill a void that's missing, that they get their kicks out of arguing.
Or monetary kicks out of arguing.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
that's why
you make more doing it that way.
That's why a lot of thumbnails or titles you'll see on YouTube, usually that have the highest views or likes on them, will be ones that are clickbaity in that way, in that they're like failure, like all that. So
yeah. And you know what? I'm gonna say just quick thing about that might eventually be what it is now, but that will never that will eventually change. Like the whole feeding the negative thing for monetary gain, that will eventually backfire on those people. It may not be 10 years from now, but at one point that's going to come back, and people are not going to. That will not be. It just. I don't even know how it's going to happen. I promise you, there's no way that's going to keep up for like ever. There's no way in hell that happens. Yeah. So we'll just see what happens, but
yeah, so that will do it for episode 47 of the Holdo Maneuver. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, leave us a review on the podcast catcher of your choice, or if you're watching this on YouTube, do all the stuff, like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all that stuff wherever it is on the screen above or below me or to the side of me or upways, sideways.
Post a video of you dancing while watching it. Something like that.
Sure, do that. You can follow us individually on social media. All that will be in the show notes as well. But where can they find you online, Paul?
Man, first of all, you can follow me on Twitter at Herman22 with 2 N's, aka P Thug. You can please follow my YouTube channel, The Comic Binge, where we my goal of the channel is to basically try to get people to read more comics and to kind of create a ground zero or a jumping on point for people to get into comics, whether they want someone to kind of follow along with them, kind of help, not want to say hold their hand where what to read, but like just kind of to help them, kind of just push them in the right direction, because my shows try as much as I can, less spoilers, just more general conversation about it, and just kind of talk about it and have people like say good, bad thing, whatever, because there's good comics, there's bad comics, just like any other medium out there. And I champion the medium so much because it's brilliant, and people need to know that it's way more than just superheroes, which I love. Superheroes, it's my bread and butter, that's what I read mostly of, but there's all kinds of comics out there. It's artsy comics, there's just it's crazy. But the Comic Binge is a passion project of mine that I'm building up slowly and surely. But yeah, if anyone out there wants to get more into comics, highly recommend subscribing to the channel. Or if you're kind of just you're interested remotely, go out there and check it out. It's a lot of fun. And if you're into Marvel, I do a lot of things called MCU required reading, where you can get into once you watch a movie. I've done a lot of movies the last couple of years and TV series where if you like a TV series, I tell you what you should read afterwards, but it might get you more into it or kind of tell you where the story is going forward or whatever. And so we just did Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where I talked about, if you want to learn about the true beginnings of the current incarnation of Guardians of the Galaxy or how it all started, I give you a 4-issue miniseries that it basically is that starting team. That was the first time they were all together. So just I'm a Marvel zombie. I that's my most knowledge of anything I have in comics. So I'm confident to say that, like, if you like Marvel, I can direct you where to go for that. So but anyway, really last thing I'll say is next week, or this week, I should say, tomorrow, we'll be doing a live stream of 2099 Spider-Man comic series, and before the Across the Spider-Verse, just kind of prep, kind of hype, if you will. So we're gonna talk about that on the Spider-Man Council, which is a personal favorite show of mine, where I grab a bunch of people and I start pounding the table. Yeah, nice. I start pounding the table for people to shut up so they can move on because there's too many people on the show. So, but yeah, Spider-Man Council episodes are a blast because I have like a bunch of rad people on there, and it's great. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, and also last thing I'll say is a couple things. I'm on a couple other Star Wars podcasts. The Saga Continues with my boys Kyle and Tim. Love those guys. And I also do a thing every other week on Star Wars Newsnet, where me and my buddy Brian, we kind of talk about Star Wars and most recently pretty much just argue about Rey Skywalker for like an hour. So
Nice.
Which is a lot of fun, which I'm actually not, it's not fun, but we argue about it. So fun for other people, maybe. I don't know.
And I will put links to all of these in the show notes on YouTube. So if people want to check any of them out, they'll be there to check out. Again, thank you for coming on the show this week. Oh,
it's an honor. Thank you.
It was this was definitely a good movie to have you on for, and timed up well with the 40th anniversary. And so Mike and I will close with, as always, we are grateful to George Lucas for creating the Star Wars universe.
Oh dear, thank the maker.